Hello everybody, welcome to this section entitled What are Pitfalls and Frequently Asked Questions for First-Time Analysts? So this will be a slightly different approach than some of the previous sections and videos that you may have seen. What we'll do is in this video and the next ones, we're going to take some broader topics, maybe a little bit more philosophical topics than we've been examining, and see how they can help first-time analysts and yourselves, as well as those who are learning more about web analytics, become more effective and continue to be effective in the future. Now, some of these questions involve things like, what are the limits of metrics themselves? What can they measure? What can we not measure with numbers? We're also going to examine why multiple time frame analysis is so important, and really, by extension, why trying to look at the same data from different perspectives, whether it's time frame or through different metrics or approaches, why it can really help us gain things that we otherwise wouldn't get if we were just looking at it one way. And in the final video, the question will be maybe the broadest of all. What are the limits of analysis itself? What are the pitfalls of too much analysis? So the title of this video is Understanding the Limits of Metrics. What can numbers tell you and what can they not? Some of the points we will cover, including the limits of metrics itself, why a single metric will never tell you the whole story, and why averages can mislead you at times. So let's see what the limit of metrics are. Well, we can sort of break this down into a few pitfalls. And the first pitfall, as we described at the onset, is that a single metric will never tell you the whole story. And this is why it's important to do multiple kinds of analysis, not really put our eggs in one basket when it comes to analysis. And this is another reason why business dashboards are so effective, because we're able to really highlight the key metrics and results in one place. And it's easy to integrate the insights from multiple sources. So here, on the right, here we have an example of one of these pitfalls. Let's say we have a website and we're just tracking the page views over time. And as we go from January to December, we see that it continues to go up, and say, maybe we'll tell ourselves or our customer, hey, things are looking great. The page views are on the increase. However, let's say we were actually going to include the bounce rate as well. And let's say the bounce rate sort of tracked with the red line the same pattern that the page views were doing. And what this would tell us is that, sure, the number of page views is nice, but actually a lot of these page views are coming from sites where people are bouncing from. So they're counting as one page view, but they're actually leaving and not doing anything useful for our site. And here is an example of something you would have totally missed if you were just looking at one of the variables, right? If you were just looking at the page views, you would have thought things were great, where in fact, when you looked at that along with the bounce rate, you would see that there was a serious problem that needed to be addressed immediately. So now we have a second pitfall that we want to keep in mind, and it's that averages can mislead you. And regarding this, there's a great quote by Sam L. Savage, who wrote a book on statistics. And he said that plans based on average assumptions are wrong on average. That certainly is true. And in terms of a demonstration of this, here is just, let's say it's a graph of page views over the course of time. And what's very interesting is that both of these graphs show the same average when it comes to the actual numbers. So both of the average will land right around 5, but you'll see that in the top example, there's an up and a down, and then there is some activity, but there is some activity going up and down, whereas on the bottom, you have just this plummeting from 10 views up until June down to 0 after July. And so here is kind of an example of something you would miss if you were just looking at that average 5. Many times you want to understand how those numbers were reached. Certainly averages are a great example of that, but there certainly are other metrics where those numbers or those averages or those metrics can mislead you if you approach them in this way.